Hey guys, what is up and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the brand new texture cache rewrite which has just been released by the Yuzu team into their early access builds for testing. This new rewrite has fixed literally hundreds of graphical, performance and stability bugs that were previously present in this emulator. This video is mainly going to be concentrating on these graphical fixes, the improvements we've gotten to performance and stability, so let's jump straight into it and take a look at some of the most major changes in this new release. For any of you Animal Crossing New Horizons fans, I'm happy to report that this new texture cache rewrite has completely fixed the broken depth of field that has plagued this game, meaning that we are no longer reliant on using the disable depth of a field mod to enable playing this game without the horrible broken black graphics. Performance has also generally improved quite a bit in this new texture cache rewrite, and as you're going to see throughout the many games we're going to be taking a look at, this kind of performance improvement is fairly common in this new release. For example, Super Mario Odyssey is one game that has performed very well on Yuzu for a long time. However, with this new release we've been given even more frames per second to enjoy. While this game currently does already run at full speed on my own system, this boost to frame rate should greatly help players on lower end systems. Another game greatly improved in the texture cache rewrite is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. For example, the teleportation graphical bug has now been completely fixed, and on top of this, when we swap over to our 60 frames per second mod and take a comparison of performance, you can see that the new texture cache is far outperforming the old one. At times, I have gotten 10 to 12 frames per second more on the new texture cache versus the old one. Another long-standing bug that's been present in Breath of the Wild on Yuzu was the slow falling rain. In this new rewrite, this has also now been fixed, though please be aware to fix it and other particle issues you are required to use high GPU accuracy. Yet another fan favorite game that has seen enormous improvements on this new update is Luigi's Mansion 3. Here in this example you can see that not only is our performance greatly improved, but the lighting, shadows, shadow flickering and stencil shadows that come off Luigi's flashlight and other dynamic light sources in the game have now also been completely fixed, making Luigi's Mansion damn close to being perfectly rendered on this emulator. Aside from the shadow and lighting issues which have just been fixed, there are a few rendering issues relating apparently to shaders that manifests as invisible floors on some levels. Hopefully this will be fixed at some point in an update in the very near future. I would also like to note that for Luigi's Mansion 3, you still do require the Disable Dynamic Resolution mod. You can find that mod in Yuzu's mod repository, which I'll link down in this video's description. Our next game, which has seen a dramatic improvement to its rendering, is Astral Chain, and as you can see when we transition from old texture cache to new, the difference in rendering is quite apparent. The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed this rendering improvement in this video's intro, but regardless, it's still really nice to see such a significant improvement coming to this game, especially so since it has run and rendered so well on this emulator already for so long. Our next game that has seen a huge graphical and performance improvement is Splatoon 2. And again, as we transition from the old to new texture cache, it's very obvious that all of the lighting and shadow issues have now been completely fixed. Several other issues relating to graphical corruption, especially so prevalent when moving from one area to the other, have also been fixed on this new texture cache rewrite, meaning that for the most part, Splatoon 2 is now perfectly rendered and should run at very acceptable performance levels, even on mid or lower tiered hardware than it ever has before. Keeping the ball rolling on games that have seen enormous graphical and performance improvements, let's take a look at the 3 Xenoblade games for the Nintendo Switch, those being Xenoblade Chronicles 2, its DLC Torna the Golden Country, and Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. On this new texture cache, any and all of the strange texture flicker or swapping has now been entirely fixed, making these 3 titles massively more playable on this emulator at even greater performance levels than you've ever seen before. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which we're looking at right now, has seen an especially large boost in performance. This is mainly because this game is running on a much older version of the engine they use for these Xenoblade Chronicles games, And again, since all of the texture swapping, graphical corruptions and all of those issues have now been solved, it no longer randomly drops its frame rate, especially so prevalent when moving from one area to the other. Something that should be noted for all three of these Xenoblade games, and similar to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, for the best possible performance and graphical output, you should be using high GPU accuracy. You can find this in the Graphics Advanced Graphics tab within Yuzu's emulator window. It should also be noted that the Xenoblade game's vertex explosions suffered by AMD GPU users have also now been fixed in this texture cache rewrite. While I've shown you literally dozens of changes this rewrite has given to us, including performance, stability and graphical fixes, there are literally hundreds of other games affected by this texture cache rewrite, which I'm sure you guys will all discover as soon as you start using it. For now, we're going to take a look at some current limitations and some plans for the future in relation to not just this texture cache, but also some features pertaining to it. The first of these being that if your hardware, mainly your GPU, does not support VK-EXT Robustness 2, you may encounter issues on this new texture cache rewrite. As far as I'm aware, it's only AMD GPUs before the Vega architecture and Intel integrated iGPUs that do not fully support this. So as usual, if you encounter any issues on this new release, please report them on Yuzu Emulator's Discord server. A workaround for lacking this support is being worked on and should be released at some point soon after the texture cache's release. Another complication that emerged during development was the memory management, specifically memory management relating to Vulkan. Originally, the plan was to release what the Yuzu team calls a texture reaper, which has the functionality of removing texture data from your GPU memory or VRAM when it has not been used in a very long time. While they had this working in several games, including Luigi's Mansion 3, where they had it running using only 300 megabytes of VRAM, Vulkan, on the other hand, seemed to see no benefit from this method of usage. The Vulkan API itself faces two main problems. It fragments the memory, and textures need to be mapped to continuous video memory. There is zero tolerance for fragmentation, so freeing blocks will not help at all if the next texture that needs to load into it does not quite fit into the empty space that was removed previously. This will require the development of a separate VRAM defragmentation routine, work on which has already begun, though we have been given no estimated time of arrival or ETA on when it is going to be finished. The final two things we need to discuss are two additions that are going to come after this texture cache rewrite. The first being accelerated texture decoding. This is going to handle any texture format via compute shaders, even texture formats that your GPU does not natively decode, like ASTC textures, which are heavily used in games like Astral Chain and Luigi's Mansion 3. In either of these mentioned games, if you've ever encountered very sudden slowdown or your game just freezing out of nowhere, the reason for this is the decoding of ASTC textures. This new implement via compute shaders is going to greatly improve the speed, performance, and general usability of any games that use this format. A final note we've been given is that Rodrigo, one of Yuzu's GPU developers, is currently working on a brand new buffer cache rewrite. This work promises to solve lots of rendering issues, for example font rendering in games like Super Mario Maker 2 and Animal Crossing New Horizon on Vulkan, as well as some serious performance issues on bandwidth limited GPUs. This implementation should greatly help performance in games like Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey, especially so on bandwidth limited GPUs like Intel integrated GPUs or any of the Vega GPUs available on AMD platforms. For now at least, that's pretty much all of the information that I myself have on this new texture cache rewrite. As always, if you encounter any bugs or issues on it, don't be afraid to drop them in the comments down below or jump over either onto my Discord or Yuzu's official Discord, and we will be happy to help you out, absolutely no problem at all. In the next 2 days, I'm going to be releasing my new and complete setup guide for Yuzu Emulator. This guide's going to include all of the best steps and settings for getting the best possible performance on this emulator, so make sure you're subscribed to get notified as soon as that video goes live. Once again guys, thank you all very much for checking out this video, I greatly appreciate it. As always, remember to like this video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see all future videos from me.